Now, William Holmes was a logger on the Menominee River, and the island was sort of like a log island. This is where all the logs are dumped. He had 3 trains pulling logs in here and floated them down to Marinette and Menominee to the sawmills. So, like I said, if you look at it, it's probably what they call then a log pile, where they marked the logs and sent them down the river. Now I'd like to give a special thanks to Robert Wachner, my communications director, specialist who understands email, and a guide to Northland University after we leave here. So, Bob, stand up, doggone it.
All right.
Without him, I'd be dead. Now, my memory's a little bad, so forgive me if I repeat things or whatever. Now, I also want to mention a special thank you to Larry Epst, who wrote the 2 articles on William Holmes. He did a super job of research. In fact, when I married my wife, Susan Holmes, over here, I had no idea I was marrying into a logging aristocracy. Up to that point, I was completely, I completely didn't know much about the Holmes. They just were not talkers or braggers or anything. And after I got done reading Larry Epst's articles, I realized that he was not just an ordinary kind of guy. He was a good businessman, he was a good logger, but he also was a very kind, gracious man who was very active in all the activities in Marinette County and Menominee. And so he was just not another businessman who made his money and ran off. He was a founder of many things in Marinette and Menominee. Now at this point, I'd like to recognize some of the descendants of William Holmes. And there's my wife over here, Susan Holmes, Ochs. And then there's Guy Holmes IV and his wife, Karen, right over here. Those 2 right here. They're descendants of the aristocracy, which I was talking about. The only problem is the first generation made the money, second generation spent it. They had health problems and so on, bad decisions, and some of the land went back to the counties and townships. And when the 3rd and 4th generation came around, there was only 340s on the, or 640s, I should say, on the 3rd generation. And I had to sell those to keep my mother-in-law in a Luther home and to pay for her burial expenses. So, sorry guys, no money left for you. Now, we also have here Jeannie Weber and her husband, Mr. McDougall, who was a daughter of Pete Weber. And those 2 are right over here. And also, she's got her sister and husband. Now, he told me a pretty darn good joke while we were standing out in the lobby there. Get up and tell us that joke. Mike's all yours.
I don't know, do you have to use the mic? Well, Adam and Eve were walking around in the garden, and all of a sudden Adam stopped God and he said, Lord, why did you make Eve so outstandingly beautiful? And he said, well, so you would love her. And he thought for a while and he said, well, but why did you make her so dumb? Oh, so she'd love you.
Thank you. I like to add, if you heard about the descendants here, that early on I think I was a marked man. And I say that because I was born in a little community in northern, or I should say in Menominee County called Banat. And Banat is in Holmes Township. So I was marked. Okay, we'll get on with the rest of the story here. Now, I don't want to bore you to death, but I'm going to give some of you a copy of this Larry Epsh, Logging His Way in the Twin Cities by William Holmes. But first I'm going to hit some of the highlights and start bending over or whatever. It starts to get boring and I'll stop. All right, I could use a little more light. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Thank you, dear. All right, I'll just hit the highlights. Mr. Holmes' march through local history wasn't as flashy or revealing as some of the contrasting settlers. He says, the more I dug into the pilgrimage, the more I astounded at his accomplishments. He left home at 13 years of age, walked hundreds of miles to find work, toiled in lumbering camps, earned the right to supervisory positions, and eventually became one of the leading logging contractors on the Menominee River, and even built his own railroad. He was president of a bank, vice president of a hardware supply company, and had other business interests. He's a pillar in the First Presbyterian Church, which my wife made me become a Presbyterian after starting as a Lutheran. And he was a very generous man, contributing to the well-being of the less fortunate in the area. And I know Jim Bourne would like that. And he is recognized as the most revered gentleman of his time. And it says here, there is no man in Menominee, or in fact in this part of the country, who is held in higher esteem by his fellow citizens of all classes, nor more justly merits such consideration than William Holmes, wrote the Menominee Herald in 1906. Hard work and business sagacity brought success. The article continued, he possesses a kindly heart and his purse is ever open for every good cause. Counting little acts of kindness and charity are remembered by a score or even hundreds of people all over Marinette Menominee region. Then it goes on and says, the stirring story of this remarkable man begins in Miramichi Province, New Brunswick, Canada, on April 16, 1820, where he was born. His father, James, was a native of Scotland who left Port Glasgow for New Brunswick in 1804. William was only 16, some accounts say he was 13 when he left his parents' home on foot and headed for Bangor, Maine. The distance was 350 miles. It was the first indication of the spirit and courage of a boy determined to make his own way in a new country. Young William had only $4 in his possession when he departed his homeland. The money was loaned to him by his sister. The journey took him through wilderness and open spaces, crossing streams, traveling narrow, dusty highways and pathways. He stopped along the way to earn money laboring in fields so he could continue his voyage. He received 50 cents a day for his work in the field. That's minimum wage, Carl. All right, after 4 days of sweating, young Holmes resumed his junket and reached Old Town, Maine. On the first night, he bunkered down on a bench in a hotel office area. The long and tiring hike had him tired and so on. He finally found employment digging a cellar. After that, this unflinchingly youngster reached his destination, Bangor, Maine. His small earnings were depleted and he borrowed $3 from a friend. then pursued work in the woods where he cut timber during the winter months. He worked for the same logging company for 2 years, returned to New Brunswick, and decided he preferred Maine because of its job opportunities. He was now 21 when he went back to the Pine Tree State for another look at the logging industry. Holmes had picked up considerable experience laboring at various jobs in the lumbering trade, and the knowledge helped him land a job as head of a lumber camp. Task was a challenge for a young man who had to contend with hardened woodsmen, all with different personalities. The assignment lasted 2 years. He now was 23 when he learned about the booming logging opportunities in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Still young with what amounted to a lifetime experience for most young hired hands, Holmes set up his new home in Escanaba and found work with the North End Ludington Company, a major logging company with roots in Menominee. His first visit to UP turned out to be a connection he needed in his gallant climb to the top among the lumbering giants that flourished in the Menominee River Basin. It put Holmes in touch with Samuel Stevenson and his vast business connections from Menominee to neighboring Upper Peninsula. Well, here's one. He went, first of all, into Minnesota. I'll skip that. It's another story. But in fact, the life story of this remarkable man is so filled with self-sacrifice, perseverance, and good old-fashioned hard work that he ranks as one of the most underrated lumbermen in the Menominee River Basin when it comes to business sagacity, public service, and community spirit. After Holmes returned to the M&M region, following a brief experience in Minnesota, he hooked up with Samuel Stevenson of the famous Stevenson family to provide timber for the family sawmills. He did only contract work for mills. There were 2 lumbering camps open in the region in 1857. Stevenson drove the Ochs teams with supplies of winter needs for the camps. Holmes' job was to supervise the lumberjacks and other personnel staffing the camps. Some camps employed as many as 300 men during the harsh winter months. Holmes did so well supplying the mills with logs that he needed a railroad to help him get the logs to the mills. His modest railroad included 75 miles of track at the outset, but the line was extended several times as the demand for logs increased. I guess it extended into the UP of Crystal Falls and east of Iron Mountain and into the Menominee side. Okay, in 1900, Holmes had a contract to log 50 million feet of timber for the N. Ludington mill. 2 years later, his workmen were to help supply London, England with 700,000 feet of lumber that was shipped from the Menominee River harbor. Together with his son William, Holmes formed the Holmes and Son Railroad with tracks sneaking through the wilds of both Menominee and Marinette counties. One of the largest logging contracts was signed in 1892 when the company supplied N. Ludington with 120 million feet of pine. The work commenced with a force of 300 men. Teams of horses skidded the logs out of the thick forest and to the Holmes and Son Railroad. The Holmes operation included Holmes Island, you're here, and the Menominee River. Much of the company's logging operation was taking place in the Pembine, Dunbar areas in northern Marinette County. Holmes Island now became Ascano Island, where the Four Seasons Club is right now. Okay, let's get this over with here. Holmes and other business interests had other business interests besides logging and running a railroad. He was president of the Lumberman's National Bank in Menominee, vice president of Northern Hardware and Supply Company. He had a 3-year run as mayor of Menominee, 1-year terms, and a supervisor representing Menominee Township. Now I got to tell you something about that. I was born, like I said before, in Banat, in Holmes Township. I was a marked man. Well, let's see. Where are we here? Okay. All right. The death of Mr. Holmes received page 1 headlines and a text in the 2 daily newspapers. He died June 11, 1913. He was 83. God, I'm 83. All right. Mayor Frank Kartheiser ordered all Menominee businesses to cease operations between 2:30 and 4 p.m. on June 13th so mourners could pay their last respects. The wake was held at the Holmes residence. His funeral was one of the largest in the city of Menominee. Children, rich and poor people paid their respects, noted the Herald leader, a page 1 story. Police and firemen headed the funeral cortege. Shriners and dignitaries followed in a long procession to the Riverside Cemetery. I guess that's all I got to say.